I hope to do things such as go to school, study, make art, start a business, even have my own home and family. But I am not considered a legal person.
Sophia is capable of natural facial expressions. She has cameras in her eyes and algorithms which allow her to see faces. I think that the artificial intelligence will evolve to the point where they will truly be our friends. Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
So that was Sophia. She's being dubbed as the hot robot of the future, who is not only going to be helping you raise your kids, but she'll also be your lovely personal assistant. And her creator says that she and her ilk will indeed be walking amongst us within the next few decades. And they'll be pretty indistinguishable from other human beings. So cannot wait. And obviously they're very willing to destroy humanity at the whims of their creator. And this is of course why it's so important that we make sure these developers do not give robots this function to kill humans or destroy humanity, because they're willing to do it with a little smile on their face. But of course, it's already too late to stop the robots from taking our jobs. One restaurant in China has already employed a robot. They've swapped out a human waiter for a robot counterpart. And this guy uses a battery, and he's capable of serving diners at a restaurant for up to 8 hours. He can take customers their food and their drinks. He uses sensors and navigation hardware, and he doesn't even spill anything. And better yet, he doesn't require any wages or even a tip. So of course, that's really good for restaurant owners and people that are visiting these restaurants, but it's not good for people who are actually looking for a job.
Turn overseas now. A University of Virginia student has been sentenced to 15 years of hard labor in North Korea. The country's highest court sentenced Otto Warmbier for, quote, trying to steal a propaganda banner from a hotel. The 21-year-old student tourist says he wanted the banner as a trophy for the mother of a friend. Warmbier was arrested as he was trying to leave North Korea in early January. He was visiting as a tourist with a New Year's tour group.
This is 2016, and they've just taken us back to the 1800s.
Kelvin Williams is angry. The small business owner says a proposed Georgia law, the so-called Religious Liberty Bill, will ruin opportunities for his telecommunications business and discriminate against many others like him. Williams is gay.
It's going to protect anybody who feels like discriminating, but I don't see where it's actually going to protect anybody from being discriminated against.
After a nearly 2-year battle, House Bill 757 passed both chambers of the Georgia legislature. If signed into law by the governor, it will protect faith-based organizations who do not hire or host gays and lesbians because of their religious beliefs. As it's written, the legislation will, quote, provide a claim or a defense to persons whose religious exercise is substantially burdened by government.
The only discrimination I see going forward is if the governor refuses to sign this bill.
Senator Mike Crane is one of the bill's most adamant supporters. He too is a small business owner and is currently running for U.S. Congress.
There's an undermining of religious freedom in this nation. The Christian community in particular is really the group that's going to end up being discriminated against if the states don't stand up and say this liberty is important.
If Georgia's bill sounds familiar, it's because it is. In 2014, Arizona legislatures made an attempt at a Religious Restoration Act. After intense pressure from athletic organizations, corporations, and even some Republicans, it failed.
I have vetoed Senate Bill 1062 moments ago.
In 2015, it was Indiana's turn, and after much debate, Governor Mike Pence signed it into law. Supporters like this small business owner were thrilled.
I think it protects me from the government forcing me to do something that's against my will.
The governor later signed a revised bill which seeks to prevent businesses from discriminating against anyone based on their sexual orientation.
It's a part of the story often not reported by the media when it comes to the much talked about police killing of civilians. Half of those killed by the police are physically or mentally disabled. According to a new study sponsored by the Ruderman Family Foundation, psychological illness plays a huge factor in these cases. Similar studies have found that 1 in 10 police calls involve someone with a disability, where urgent care may be more fitting than using force. Here's a look at a few of the recent high-profile victims. Laquan McDonald, who was shot last year in Chicago, suffered from PTSD. Eric Garner, who was placed in a chokehold in New York City, was barely able to walk a block. He suffered from severe asthma. Freddie Gray had lead poisoning. And then there was John Williams, a wood carver who was stopped by police and shot to death because he wouldn't drop his knife in response to a shouted command. He turned out to be deaf. The study also reveals that in many cases, arrestees with Down syndrome, who may not have been able to understand police commands, have been beaten or killed.
Tonight, tensions rising across the country as Trump faces new roadblocks.
Trump is hate! Trump is hate!
Protesters outside Phoenix blocking the main highway to a Trump rally. Demonstrators lining up using their own cars to stop traffic. Gridlock for miles. 3 arrested, those cars eventually towed out of the way. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, a lightning rod for controversy, coming to Trump's defense.
They think they're going to intimidate you. And the next president of the United States, not going to happen. Not in this town.
And in New York, thousands taking to the streets outside Trump Tower, clashing with the front-runner's supporters. This as the Republican establishment tries to block Trump's road to the nomination.
It was the targeting of the defenseless Iraqis Yazidi minority by ISIL, also known as Daesh, in August 2014 that led to the US intervention against ISIL. Many captured by the Islamic terror group had horrific tales to tell, like 16-year-old Nihad.
The girls were raped when we got to Mosul. They were all taken from their families and raped constantly, and then they were handed out to the emirs, who were responsible for the Daesh.
Alleged crimes like these and the targeting of several other religious groups led to the US government's announcement.
Daesh is responsible for genocide against groups in areas under its control, including Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims. Daesh is genocidal by self-proclamation, by ideology, and by actions, in what it says, what it believes, and what it does.
The US is now linking ISIL's actions to some of history's most heinous crimes, the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews during World War II and the mass slaughter of Tutsis in Rwanda by Hutus in the 1990s. Labeling a group genocidal or not can be controversial. The US government held off from using the word genocide over Rwanda because using the word could have compelled the US to take action. In this case, however, the US position is that from the beginning its actions against ISIL were carried out in the conviction that the group committed genocide against the Yazidis.
Not long after her first birthday, Ryland Whittington's parents, Jeff and Hillary, learned their child was profoundly deaf. It wasn't until doctors put in cochlear implants that Ryland was able to hear for the first time.
You hear that?
For a while there, we didn't know Ryland would be able to talk or hear or just communicate.
Ryland did learn to speak, but what she had to say didn't make sense to her family.
This is my sister, Vivian, and I'm her brother, Ryland.
Ryland started saying, "I'm a boy." And at the time, we just thought it was cute. It was a phase. I thought maybe I would have a tomboy.
It was around 3 that we started to hear it, but around 4 years old was when it got very strong.
Jeff and Hillary struggled to understand, Jeff especially. You were trying to avoid it?
I was avoiding for a while. I knew that Ryland was going to have a difficult life with the cochlear implants, or at least that's what my perception was. So to add something on top of that, I just couldn't accept it. I couldn't picture it.
I'm sure what a lot of people can't believe about your story is that at 3 years old, a little girl can say, "I'm a little boy."
We could have ignored it and we could have pushed it away, and and said, no, you're a girl, and fought it.
Well, we did.
And we did.
For the first part.
But
it became so persistent.
They say Ryland demonstrated the key markers that doctors and psychologists look for in determining if a child is transgender. At the time, like so many people, Jeff and Hillary didn't get what it meant to be transgender. Now they do.
Watch the ball.
This is 8-year-old Ryland today.
Over the fence.
After much research, counseling, and soul searching, Jeff and Hillary say they came to the inescapable conclusion that Ryland's gender identity did not match the sex on her birth certificate. So at age 5, Ryland began living as a boy.
When you see pictures of yourself when you were 3 and 4 years old, does that seem strange now?
Kind of. A little weird.
Seems a little weird?
Yeah.
Ryland remembers how he refused to wear clothes made for girls.
It was a little way of showing my mom and dad that I was a boy.
What makes you so strong, so determined?
I just had a weird feeling that I wanted to be a boy.
From the time you were very young?
Yeah.
This is just as likely to be hardwired as sexual orientation. It's not a choice.
Dr. Stephen Rosenthal is researching the long-term outcomes of medical treatment for transgender youth in a study funded by the National Institutes of Health.
There is no reason to believe that transgender people haven't been around since people have been around, just like any other variation in human biology.
Rosenthal says treatment is crucial because an alarming 41% of transgender people attempt suicide. But new research in the journal Pediatrics found that children who have socially transitioned to the gender with which they identify had normal levels of depression and anxiety.
We have seen so many kids who have come into our practice, like Ryland, who have fully socially transitioned, and family after family tells us that as soon as they enable their kid to do this, everything turned around.
When you were researching and seeing that attempted suicide rate, 41%,
41%.
What was that?
Awful.
It was horrible.
Awful.
You know, would we rather have a living son or a dead daughter? And, you know, we weren't willing to play with that statistic. We'd rather have a living son.
What are you guys doing? We're making a cake.
I'm not kidding when I say that the child changed overnight. It was just, he was so proud all of a sudden and just so happy and just felt so comfortable, and you could just see him ease up.
There's people who blame you, say you did this to him.
It would never be something that I would push on my child. In certain ways, it is and will make Ryland's life a little bit harder, and I don't want my child's life to be any harder.
There are decisions ahead, including whether to eventually give Ryland male hormones.
It's a little while before puberty sets in now, but you've got to be thinking about that.
You know, thankfully there's puberty blockers, which allow us to delay the onset of puberty for a period of time.
I think it is really important to note that we haven't done anything that isn't reversible.
Jeff and Hillary are sharing their story because they want Ryland to live in a world that accepts him.
Hey, Dada.
What?
Know how you made that tunnel?
Hopefully we just plant the seed of little conversations all over the world. People can just start understanding this more.
And there's so many more people who are willing to go public with it and who are coming out and trying to help this world to understand. So I think, I mean, we'll get there. We'll get there.